speaker this evening is Tom Smith. Tom is a U.S. Air Force veteran and a graduate of the Air Force Academy. He served active duty for 11 years, starting in 2003, including 3 tours in the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan. He specialized in combat search and rescue. I don't know of a tougher job. He was the leader of his team of pararescuemen. Tom transitioned from active duty in 2014, transitioned to Team Rubicon, which is a veteran-led disaster relief organization. Some of you may have remembered that from Ken Harbaugh's talk at the beginning of the season. Since then, Tom has led medical teams in West Africa, South America, most recently at a camp in Greece for refugees fleeing ISIS. His talk tonight is called "What It Took Almost a Decade to Learn." Please join me in welcoming Tom Smith.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Can everybody hear me, or do you guys need me to use the mic? Everybody's good? Good. Awesome. Well, first and foremost, I know we have a room full of veterans and, more importantly, a bunch of veteran advocates. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. I've been all over the place in the military. As you saw, I got to go to South America, the jungles there. I've got to travel to the Saharan desert in West Africa. I could tell a bunch of war stories, and we could have a good time. But I am hard-headed, and it took me 10 years to learn a lesson. And I want to share that with you, because I have worked with refugees fleeing war zones, fleeing ISIS. I have picked up Marines missing all 4 of their limbs, and I have worked with young girls in a refugee camp that have 3rd-degree burns. And they kept asking me a single question, and a single answer came time and time again. They were struggling with one thing, was what the hell am I here for now? What's my purpose? And so that's what I want to talk to everyone tonight, and I'll start with understanding what my purpose was as a 24-year-old graduate of the Air Force Academy. I went through 2 years of training with some wonderful men. We had 110 at the beginning of my selection course. After 2 years, there was 4 of us that made it through our course. Very, very fortunate not to get injured and hurt during that time. And then I was fortunate to deploy. This will be the video. It will kind of highlight a little bit of our deployments, a little bit of our main mission. But our main mission comes down to search and rescue. It was created back in the 1950s when we first got our mission. Basically, pilots that got shot down. And so we were called Jolly Green back in the day, was our call sign. And all the way from Vietnam, it continued to morph into our mission to Afghanistan today. We have people on the western border of Iraq right now actually doing search and rescue missions for people that get shot down. But more importantly, they pick up people when they're hurt. They pick up civilians when they're hurt. They pick up military folks when they're hurt. So we get called on people's worst days. So I'll play a quick video and I'll talk you through it. So our aircraft of choice is the HH-60. It's a Black Hawk variant. It's just the Air Force's version here. This is it. This is a rock. You can see very, very dusty. We work with a great crew. Our nickname is PJs, which stands for Pararescue Jumpers, which is not the most intimidating name, I understand. When you say, PJs are here. You name the way that you get hurt, we can get to you. So we fly on helicopters. We are static line and free fall. This is us doing free fall with all the equipment with a person. If we need to, sometimes we jump in with an interpreter. Our main purpose was that others may live. If you get shot down, we're coming for you. We're going to live up to that creed no matter what we have to do. This is during our training. Every special operations branch has their way. The Navy SEALs have cold water and lack of sleep. We just have putting you into the pool and trying to drown you to see you could run 5 miles, you can ruck all day, but about 10 seconds without air, 20 feet under, makes you kind of freak out and kind of judges your character pretty quick. So this is going through the dunk training in case our helicopter crashed. We do jump into the water occasionally. We rappel out of the helicopter if we need to. Like I said, you're going to see a bunch of photos time and time again. At the end of the day, all that stuff is fun, but it is getting to that patient. We specialize on combat casualty care. So gunshot wounds, IED blast, bomb blast, amputations, shrapnel, burns, getting people to the hospital in something called a golden hour. We've learned from our Vietnam veterans that if we can get you to a hospital within an hour, your likelihood of surviving is a lot higher. And so that's why it took us 2 years. We have all kinds of different courses, from technical rescue, from mountaineering stuff, from pool stuff, from jump stuff. And so through all of this, I serve on a very, very, very small team. We have, our smallest element is 6 guys. Our biggest element is 12 people. And so I knew these guys, trained with them for 2 years, did 6 months of pre-training before you deploy, and then you deploy with them from 4 to 6 months. So I knew these guys. I went through hell and back with these guys. It could be a pitch dark room. I could know the guy to my right just by him being near me. And it was just that wonderful, wonderful experience being deployed with these gentlemen, going through the awful things that we had to see. But at the end of the day, you had a great sense of purpose. You had a purpose waking up every single morning. It was clear, it was to save people, but it was also to get your buddy home at the end of the day, which I know all my fellow veterans can understand. It's about the guy to the left and the guy to the right of you, or now the gal to the left and right of you. It's all kinds of different training. One of the things they love to do was for us to drag people. We do a lot of firemen's carries of people for miles upon miles upon miles. But this is what took me 10 years to learn. I had to say this every single morning as a PJ, and it was our creed. It is my duty as a pararescueman to save lives and to aid the injured. I was prepared at all times to perform my assigned duties quickly and efficiently, placing these duties before personal desires and comforts. These things I do that others may live. It seems simple, but it's so impactful, and I forgot about this for a couple years when I got out of the military. And as I bumped into people that were in a lot worse circumstances, they understood some of these things that I didn't. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about, the sense of purpose, about when adversity, placing others before yourself, being in crappy situations, being in adversity, how that can bring a team together. And then finally, if you place something bigger than yourself, that others may live, your country, above yourself, how that just completes a lot of things in a person's life. So this is my first deployment. I went to Iraq. That's our 6-man team right there. Very, very proud. I was a young lieutenant, and my NCO had been in for 23 years. He had over 10 deployments. He's the guy on the far left, Robert Disney. He was an E9, so he's a chief. So I wanted to call him sir. Obviously, he wouldn't let me do that. He would correct me automatically. And Special Operations is a really unique, it's a very, very small team. And we didn't have officers up until 2002. So during Vietnam, PJs were only enlisted. Their commanders were the aircraft commanders. And so in 2002, we started doing a lot more stuff on the ground. So the dynamic changed a little bit of saying, oh, it's no longer being on the ground for 30 minutes or an hour. Maybe we have to be on the ground for 6 hours, 10 hours, working with the Army to do a bunch of stuff. So maybe we need an officer. So I came into a career field where you really have to humble yourself. We did 2 years of training. You have from medical skills to diving to mountaineering to all kinds of stuff. It takes years to learn all of this. And so you had this wonderful sense of humbling yourself and willingness to learn. And that had to be day in and day out kind of deal. And the first story that I will tell is from my second deployment, talking about adversity, where we had to go rescue a couple Marines that were attached to an Afghan National Army unit. They were riding in one of these. This is an MRAP. It's a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle. It weighs almost 20 tons. And in Afghanistan, to this day, one of their biggest things they use for IEDs, improvised explosive devices, are old Russian 105 military, or 105 millimeter shells. Any artillery people in here? 105s, they're big. And they'll link 2 or 3. We're thinking they link 6 together. This is a 20-ton vehicle. We got an emergency call at about 2 a.m. in the morning saying this thing got blown up and flipped. So for it to flip over, that had to be, I can't even imagine the size of that explosion. So we get scrambled. We had to be wheels up from when they say go in 7 minutes. So we have every night we do 12-hour shifts. We're all staged. We're all going. But it was one of those nightmare scenarios because now there was no communications. They were out in the middle of basically an old minefield. And what they were doing, the enemy at that time, was trying to lure us in and then ambush the aircraft and also do a secondary attack where if that can be either a visual person can detonate the second blast or radio signals will detonate the second blast. So we had to go into this area with 0 communications. We always fly on 2 helicopters, so I got half of my team on 1 aircraft, and I got my other 3 people on the following aircraft. So we had to do everything on night vision goggles and by hand signals and just coordinating with the people on the ground. So we get on the ground, and the wonderful Marines had followed the protocol, and they basically had put chem lights. So these chem lights are something you only can see at nighttime with NVGs, so no one else can see it, but basically making a path of we've cleared this, walk on this path. If you walk to the left, walk to the right, there's probably mines there. And so we're carrying our litters. We got told there's going to be 10 people inside this. We get there, we bring in the second aircraft, and when that second aircraft comes in Afghanistan they have something called moon dust. It's very, 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 very thin moon dust, and it basically makes this big cloud. You saw the video before, you kind of see that big billow cloud. Well, it's the helicopter pilot's worst nightmares. Do I have any helicopter pilots in here or anybody that flew on Hueys? Well, anyway, a big dust cloud goes up. The pilot can't see anything. He's already on night vision goggles. And so they had a really, really hard landing. Luckily, the second team got out. No one was injured, but we saw the helicopter just do this crazy landing. They get out, they're okay. My sergeant comes up, completely calm, walks up like nothing happened. Hey, what do you need? And what we needed to do was spend 3 hours cutting this thing open. And so same thing you guys see with the fire department. We have jaws of life. We have something called a sawzall. And basically it took us 3 hours to get inside this thing. And when you opened it up, there was 1 Marine had ended up treating about 8 of the people inside. What happens is you're inside of a tin can and you have a pressure wave that hits that from that IED blast, and it messes with your lungs. So every single person in there was basically having problems breathing or had severe concussions. So everyone's just kind of out of it. So we finally get everybody out and come back. There was 2 killed in action that night, 2 Afghans. The 3 Marines were all wounded in action. We got them back. It took over about 6 hours for that mission. And it's just kind of that solidifying of that pararescueman creed that it was that others may live. There was never a hesitation of like, oh, okay, well, this is way too dangerous. Maybe we shouldn't do it. There was never a hesitation of, oh crap, our aircraft almost crashed. Maybe we need to turn around. It was, we had our mission. It was our Marine brethren as well as our Afghan brethren, which were fighting for their country. We need to get there and save them. And yes, there was a bunch of adversity, but that was just bringing us together and kind of focusing on the mission. So though, that was in 2012 and 2013, my deployment to Afghanistan. I was so excited leading this wonderful group of men, biggest honor of my life. Then I made the transition out. I thought I had everything lined up. I was wondering, using my GI Bill to go back to school. So I was going back to school for exactly what I wanted to study. And I started hitting a wall. Well, I'm like, okay, well, I missed the team. Okay, I missed the adversity. And so I wasn't happy. It definitely was not PTSD, but it's just, I didn't have that purpose. I wasn't waking up in the morning of, I got my guys, I got my mission, and I have my clear purpose of what I need to do today and where I'm going. And so I honestly stumbled around for a while. Doing grad school, I fortunately have been engaged for a couple years now to the same person who's been putting up with me for 7 years. During that time, me going through school, I definitely was not the best person I could be. But then finally, I started understanding, went back to the creed. Okay, these things I do that others may live. Okay, I can understand that. Well, how about placing personal desires and comforts before ahead of everything else? It's not about me. Let's talk about this adversity. So I remember, went back to a story about when I was having some of these difficult times in graduate school. And so I thought I missed like the excitement. I was jumping out of airplanes, I was getting shot at. I was doing dive school, all this great stuff. So I thought I missed that side of the house. And so what did I do? I joined a rugby team. So I thought that was okay, cool. That was excitement, but that would wear off after a day or two. That wasn't it. Then I thought, well, maybe I need to do something harder. I need to do something more adverse. Because I remember when I was in the military, we had to do, we'd go out to the field for survival training. And the first order I ever gave was during one of our survival trainings. It was out in the mountains of New Mexico. Ended up sleeting us all day. It was like day 3 without food, all this great stuff. I'm a brand new officer, and I'm attached with my other guy here. It was just 2 of us. We're crossing through the mountains. And on the second night, it rained on us. All of our stuff was wet. So we literally just had to walk around in a circle for 8 hours, just because you couldn't sleep, you're going to freeze to death. So you just got to keep moving to keep your body temperature up. And so the third night, we've already not slept for 2 nights. And so the third night, I'm just like, I cannot wait. I don't know if it's day 5 or day 10 where we're done. I don't know. But I'm so excited for 3 things. I'm excited for a hot shower, which most of you guys can understand, guys and gals in here. I'm excited for a hot shave. And then the third S, it's a hot something, starts with an S, but I can't tell you guys. I think you guys can guess. But it's just a good toilet that you don't have to do out in the middle of the field where you got to drill your own little cat hole. Anyway, so our third night, I'm thinking about this, and we're still wet. Our gear is still soaked. It hadn't gotten dry. And so my buddy, he's a Boston guy, Lavoy was his name, and I say, listen, we got 2 options tonight. We can do the exact same thing we did last night, was literally walk around in a circle until sun comes up, or I'll give you 2 options. You can be big spoon or little spoon. So we're going to cuddle tonight for body heat so we can actually sleep, because we got a mission the next couple days. And so Lavoy, this Boston guy, was like, you're crazy. I'm like, okay, this is an order. I'll give you an option, but we have to cuddle tonight so we can actually get some sleep, because we don't know if it's going to go for 2 more days. We don't know if it's going to go for 10 more days. We got to have our wits about us. And so we did it, took turns, and we ended up getting some sleep that night. And so that mindset was in my head. I gotta have that adversity, because I'm gonna do the same thing in grad school. I'm gonna go do something tough, because as soon as you get out into the mountains, start doing some tough again, you get back home and you have all those amenities again, those first couple days, you're so freaking happy. You're just like, awesome, I got a flush toilet, I got a hot shower, I got a hot meal, this is the best thing ever. But obviously, even that wears off after a couple days. But me being hard-headed, I had to learn that again. So I was out in the mountains during grad school, so every single weekend I went out by myself, out to like 14,000 feet mountains, hiked around, spent the night out by myself in the mountains. Same thing, I'd come back, I'd be happy for a couple days, be happy for my bed, happy for a hot shower, but still, I was struggling. I was like, something's not right. And it was in 2015, I came back and heard about this organization called Team Rubicon. So Ken Harbaugh spoke about it 2 months ago. But basically, Team Rubicon is a veteran-led organization that retrains veterans to go into disaster zones, whether it's hurricanes, whether it's floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, man-made disasters, etc. They started in 2010. 2 enlisted Marines saw the earthquake in Haiti and the devastation down there and saying, that looks a lot like what I just came back from Iraq. We can go do something. So they called up a couple buddies, called a couple doctor buddies, flew down there, 6 of them, ended up setting up a small clinic in Haiti and treating people for 2 weeks. So that kind of was the genesis. So I'd heard about this, and I'm still finishing up grad school, and in April, In April of 2016, I saw this. This is their motto, and I signed up immediately. That is, through this continued service of going to serve in disaster zones, that veterans can regain the 3 things most often lacking after their departure from the military. That purpose, a community, and a sense of self-worth. So I signed up, and literally 2 months later, I got an email of saying, hey, Ecuador in South America just had a 7.8 earthquake. And we're going to send a medical team down there. We're going to be there in 48 hours. Do you want to go? So I actually watched this video clip. This is what is on the news. So within 48 hours, we were on the ground. We had people from all across America. Everyone was volunteers. We had ER docs. We had nurses. We had people just like me that were medics in the military. And we get on the ground, and we have all of this gear, all this medical gear. Some of us trying to figure out what to do. We're back into the thick of things. And we start seeing some of the devastation on the ground. So Ecuador, it's a developing country. We're out in the countryside. It's already struggling. You have this massive, massive, massive natural disaster, 7.8 earthquake hit. So you just see this. We're driving along to where the epicenter was, which is about a couple hours north of where we flew into. And you just say, all right, Tom, what'd you get it back into? But it was starting that clarity of purpose, that adversity was there. You're seeing these people's houses just completely destroyed, spent their entire life. They don't have insurance. That doesn't exist down there for a lot of these people. And we ended up bumping into a couple Ecuador military guys. And we started joking with them. We had a couple people that spoke Spanish, and it instantly, despite the language barrier, we hit it off with these Ecuador Army guys. And they invited us to some of their barracks. This is their basic barracks up in the mountains. And they let us basically set up a forward operating base. So on the concrete floors, we got our little sleeping bags all set up. We got our mosquito nets. And we were back into the thick of things. This was our team. We had people not only from the United States. The young lady stepping on the vehicle was Dr. Emma Butterfield. She's a UK ER doc. She spoke wonderful Spanish. And the reason I'm showing you this picture was you had these people from all different backgrounds coming together with one purpose, to save people's lives. And not only are you helping other people, we are so, so happy to actually be serving again, to have that sense of purpose. And I'll tell a quick funny story. We get these 4x4 vehicles, and we're driving through these mountains. And right after the earthquake, they say when it rains, it pours. It had like a torrential downpour. So now you had these earthquakes, injured a bunch of people, and now you had this rain, basically did a bunch of landslides to block off these roads. So now you have hurt people, can't get medical supplies up to them. But guess what? We military people are good at? We can throw a rock on our back and we can get to you. So that's what we were planning to do. We're going to go up in the mountains to some of these people that hadn't had medical care for a while. And we were going to try to ruck up to them, set up a mobile clinic up in the mountains. Well, we had like a day-and-a-half long drive to get up there. We have everything in the vehicle loaded up, and we're just going through these mud pile after mud piles that are way steep. And we ended up high-lowing this little SUV. And so basically it was right on the axle. No 4 of our tires were touching anymore. And so we all get out. I was the one taking the picture here. And I stripped down to my underwear, and basically we just start digging through this mud. For about 4.5 hours, we're digging through this mud. And we're setting up every single system. We have some ropes and pulleys just to try to get this thing unstuck. It is not budging. And so now some of the nurses and docs, I'm like, we're probably going to be sleeping here tonight. So people were kind of freaking out a little bit, but it's like, we'll be okay. And before you know it, that vehicle in front, one of the locals showed up and saying, hey, I got some toe ties here. And so we're like, thank God. We hook them up. This is just as the sun's coming down after about 8 hours trying to get this thing out. And we're like, okay, well, we need someone to push the gas to help to go forward. And we knew we wouldn't let one person help the doc, the ER docs, Dr. Emma Butterfield, the UK lady, because we're like, when we get there, we're done. Our job is done. You got to start actually treating the patients in some aspects. We'll help you, but so you just sit there, sleep kind of deal. And so she was the clean one. So she's like, hey, I don't know how to drive. I've lived in London my entire life. I've took the subway everywhere. We're like, yeah, just get in the car. You got to push the gas pedal. And so finally, we got this car hooked up that's going to tow us out. We are covered in mud. We're all behind this vehicle getting ready to push. And so I'm doing the count, like on 3, everybody, we're going to go ahead and push. So I'm like, 1, 2, and then Emma sticks out. She's like, wait, in a nice British accent. She's like, which one's the gas? And we just start dying laughing. Like, you are a doctor of emergency medicine, and you do not know which one the gas pedal is. And she's like, I told you, I've never driven before. And so to this day, we will always give her crap for that. So eventually we told her it's the one on the right. I don't know, just having you look down before. But we were so happy, despite all this adversity, despite all this craziness and sadness around us, we had a team, we had a purpose, and it was serving something bigger than ourselves. So all those things were good again. And I felt reconnected, but I worked with some other veterans. Joe is the guy on the left. He was also a Marine. He was a Marine. He served in Afghanistan as well. He lost his leg, same year I was there, to an IED, his left leg. It was an above-the-knee amputation. And Joe did have PTSD. He was very fortunate to be medically retired and to get full compensation. But now he went from serving in the Marine Corps on the front lines to losing his leg, and then he got out and he lost his purpose. He didn't have his guys with him anymore. He wanted to continue to serve. And Team Rubicon says, yes, this is a first step. VA, we need you. We need this medical compensation to give you an opportunity to pay your bills. But at the end of the day, he was still struggling, trying to figure out what to do. And we said, hey, Joe, yes, you're missing a leg, but you're a Marine. You can get stuff done, and we're going to be hiking up in the mountains. Sounds pretty tough, right? Right up your alley. So he came up here. We ended up doing missions up into the mountains like I talked about 10 kilometers, about over 6 miles up just this awful terrain. It's rainy, it's slippery, and Joe is whooping our butts. Like, he's like a half mile in front of us half the time. He goes back, like, hurry up, guys. Like, there's people waiting on us, just back and forth, back and forth. And so, like, I'm an Air Force Special Operations guy, and I was like, I'm so tough. Joe's just putting us all to shame. So eventually, I have to recover my dignity. I'm like, it's not fair, Joe. You're missing a leg that's like a third of your weight, maybe half. You clearly have a weight advantage. You're just skipping up in here. So got a good joke out of that one. But that's what Joe did. We didn't give him an excuse. We asked him saying, hey, we need you in this. This isn't just a good thing for you to come along. We had opportunities like this. This was after 2 weeks on the ground. And this right here is something money can't buy. So a lot of people think, don't put people like Joe into more adversity. He's already lost a leg. But we have to view adversity sometimes. Adversity can't always be a tragedy. Sometimes it's an opportunity. Sometimes that adversity is an opportunity to push all the bullcrap to the side and have a clarity of purpose. Awesome. I know what I'm doing. I'm here to serve. Sometimes adversity is an opportunity to unite people from all different backgrounds to what really matters, is service. And sometimes adversity is an opportunity to overcome for something that can never be bought, but only earned. It's that self-respect. I mean, that right there, that hug for Joe was awesome. It wasn't, thank you for the check, $3,000 check. Thank you for your service. It was, I'm able to serve again, and someone is thankful for that. And so when I saw that, my wheels started turning of like, wow, this works in the veterans community. I've seen it with Joe. We didn't give him an excuse. We gave him an opportunity to succeed. And you come back, and we only were on the ground for 2 weeks, but I stay in touch with the majority of these people to this day, even though this is about 3 years ago. It's just, as all of you know that have served in the military, through that adversity, it creates that band of brothers, band of sisters. You got that unity. Like, To this day, you could call somebody up and say, hey, I need you to be here at 2 o'clock tomorrow. No questions asked, they'll be there at 2 o'clock tomorrow. That was through adversity, that's through service. That's something that I slowly started to learn. And the reason why I am harping on this is this isn't just important to Iraq and Afghan vets. This is important a lot broader. Who knows the infamous 22 a day? 22 a day?
Suicide.
Yes, unfortunately there's 22 veterans every single day kill themselves, take their own lives. So, stats actually say this is an increasing problem, but actually it only became a bigger problem than civilians in 2008. So since we started recording this in the 1940s. And actually, majority of these veterans, they're not my age. They're actually over 50 years old. Most of them are actually, majority are Vietnam veterans. U.S. military, compared to our other brethren that we served with overseas, including our British soldiers, we have the highest rate of PTSD in the world. We have twice the rate of British soldiers. The U.S. government spends $4 billion annually on PTS disability payments. The reason why I bring that up, the reason I start sharing that thing about Joe, who is that veteran, is this sense of purpose, this sense of unity, and this sense of service to something bigger than yourself is a message that not only works for my generation, this works for all veterans' generations. And we saw Joe that says, someone who thinks you're weak gives you an excuse. It'd been so easy for society to say, hey Joe, sorry for you, here's your check. Don't show up to work on time. You don't have to actually work if you don't want. You can be a drug addict. You can be an alcoholic. We'll understand you. We said, no, Joe, we need you to go to the mountains of Ecuador, carry a ruck 10 kilometers up into the mountains, and work your ass off for 2 weeks for free. None of us were getting paid. We'll buy some food for you. We might buy your ticket. And he stood up, and through that, he was able to gain some self-respect back, some sense of purpose. Joe's doing great today. Keep in touch with him. He's been on like 15 missions all over the United States. He came actually here. Team Rubicon deployed a team when the hurricane hit in Texas. We had our British folks come to the United States and actually help Texans kind of help dig out. So, but this doesn't just work for veterans. This works for people from all different backgrounds. So in 2016 in May, the war in Syria, the civil war, had been going on for over 4 years. And in 2016 in May, the border closed in Eastern Europe. So you have 60,000 Syrians and Iraqis that were fleeing ISIS. They were now stuck in Greece. A lot of these, because it literally, the border closed at like 10 p.m. A lot of these families were doing was families of 4 or 5. The young men and the husbands would go ahead in the day, find a camp, and then the children and the mom would come up and meet them at the camp at night. Well, the border closed. A lot of these people, moms were on the Greece side, and the dads were on the opposite side of the border. They couldn't get back across. So they had just fled a war zone, had just decided to get in a little rubber dinghy to cross the ocean, survived that. They thought they made it to Europe. They thought they were being safe, and now they're cut off. And there's a bunch of politics attached to this. I completely understand. I am just going to tell my personal story about these two guys in the back. The guy on the right is Omar. The guy on the left is Rocky. They are brothers. They were 16 and 17 at the time. Their dad is an engineer, a PhD engineer in Syria. His mom was a French teacher in college. And they went out to the market one day in 2015, and they came back, and their house had been shelled. Everything was gone. So they made the decision to flee to Turkey. When they got to Turkey, there were no jobs, no opportunity there. So their dad was basically a day laborer and decided to say, hey, I can make like $5 a day. You guys go ahead to start the process to get to Europe. I'll stay here so I can wire you money because we don't know how long that process is going to be. Ended up being a smart move because they ended up being stuck in this camp where I met them for over 16 months. And when I got to this camp, We deployed with about a 10-person medical team. Same concept was we have 2 weeks of medical volunteers. Every 2 weeks they're coming. I was fortunate to be there for 7 months running this team. We had basically doctors and nurses, firefighters, saving up their entire years, 2 years, 2 weeks of leave to come out to serve on our team out there. So we ran this small clinic for about 200 refugees, mostly from Syria, some from Iraq. And guess what our number one need was when we got there? We could have the best doctors in the world, we could have the best nurses, all the medicine in the world. You can't talk to them, you can't do primary care. If you go to your primary care doctor, if you can't talk to him, he or she can't treat you. So the number one asset we needed was translators. So I spoke a little Arabic from my days being in the military and afterwards in graduate school. Wasn't the dialect that I needed, and so I was the leader of the group. My number one asset was I need to find some translators. So we started hiring a couple people that were educated in college that were coming there for this, and it just wasn't a good fit. It was hard to get them motivated, etc. And we had these 2 young men that knew about 10 words of English in July, and they just started helping out with whatever they could. Like, hey, we got to carry some stuff over here, carry some stuff over here. Hey, this. And within 2 months of them working with us on a day-to-day basis, just doing small stuff, they ended up learning medical English in 2 months. And for over that 7 months, they ended up being our primary medical interpreters day in and day out. And it was that sense of purpose. You start learning when you go to the refugee camps a couple things about people who struggle at the camps, where they just fled a war zone, but finally they're in a peaceful area. They're not where they exactly want to be just yet. They're in Greece. There was no jobs there. They're kind of on hold. They're hoping to go somewhere else. But you start understanding that kids, 7-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, they do fine. They're playing around. They're happy. They're running around. Then you got their parents, 25, 30, 35, maybe the grandparents. They're doing okay as well because they got to wake up every day, take care of the kids, change diapers, fix some food. But the guys and gals that do the worst in these camps are the 18 to 25-year-olds, the 16 to 25-year-olds, because they're in high school, they're in college, they're about to get married, and boom, through no fault of their own, their life gets interrupted. And I noticed that as soon as I got to the camp. I'm like, they're suffering. Omar and Radwan and these guys are suffering the exact same thing I got out from the military. It was like, what the hell am I here for now? Like, what's my purpose? What am I doing? I can sit here for 12 months, 16 months, I don't know how long it's going to be, and I'm just waiting on something. And that sense of despair sets in. And out of all, there was hundreds of nonprofits there doing the same medical work. We were the only one that says, hey, let's use these guys. Let's train them. And hey, holy crap, in the military, this guy was in Afghanistan training Afghans. This guy was in Iraq training Afghans or Iraqis. We're really good at that. We just had 10 years, 12 years in a war zone of training people, medical skills, training them in other stuff. That's a perfect fit. Team Rubicon, let's go ahead and retrain people to help out their own community. So these guys, not only were our interpreters, we had only 12 people. We had 200 people every single day we had to treat. Some of these people hadn't had medical care in 4 years. We had kids with third-degree burns. We had 12-year-old children with gunshot wounds through and through, old scars. We had pregnant women that hadn't seen a doctor a day in their life go in labor in the middle of the night. So we needed help. And we could only be on call for about 12 to 14 hours. So every single night, the camp, we had to leave it for about 6 hours at night. I needed first responders at the camp because when you call in Greece, the ambulance, it could take 6 hours, it could take 2 days to get there. That's not acceptable. So we trained these guys in basic first aid. And we taught them, they were responding in the middle of the night, the first 20 minutes while we're coming there to help if there was an emergency. They're helping the mom for the first 20 minutes when her water breaks. When a kid falls down the stairs, has a huge gash in his head, they're applying pressure. And guess what? After a month of them doing that, let's go ahead and train up these other young men and young women that want to learn how to do this. People want to learn these skills. They want to be helpful again. And so before you know it, these guys are thriving. I mean, they're speaking English, medical English, which I can't even speak that well in 2 months. These guys are thriving. And these guys weren't the worst I saw in Syria or in the refugee camp from Syrians. These guys, all they had to go through, quote unquote, was coming home and seeing their house gone. They were still with their family. They still were relatively safe in Greece. And I never saw any signs of PTSD, but I did see them be very effective of coming back and serving again. But I did meet an individual. His picture isn't here, but he helped treat this young lady right here. Her name is Lena. She was 7 years old, and when you're in a war zone, the simplest things will get you. So she was crippled from like a small, little quick surgery that would fix the hip, if anywhere else in the world, because she didn't do that. She had never walked a day in her life. She was wheelchair bound. So being wheelchair bound in a war zone, so they had to go from Syria, they had to walk to Turkey, they had to go from Turkey into a boat into Greece to continue to walk. So basically her family had carried her makeshift wheelchair, and we had located a wheelchair for her. Unfortunately, her case wasn't too rare, but we ended up bumping into this one gentleman named Abdullah, and his picture isn't up here today because his family is still in Syria, so he's afraid of sharing those pictures anywhere else. Met this guy, we had a couple conversations, his English was okay, and he started telling me that he was a physical therapist in Damascus, which is the capital of Syria, and he had made the decision to start helping both sides of the civil war, and in Syria that's not something you want to do, and so he ended up being in a prison camp with interrogations. So he told me a little bit about this, but really wouldn't go into details. And we had a lot of young kids and other people and elderly people that needed a physical therapist. And I found Abdullah. He'd been there 6 months. He's going to be staying for a couple years in Greece. He wanted to find work. He had 2 kids, had a wife he wanted to support, couldn't find a job anywhere. I'm like, this makes sense. Let's use your physical therapy skills, working with our medical team that has a bunch of technology. Let's do some physical therapy for Lena. And within 2 weeks of Abdullah coming, she was out of her wheelchair, assisted. Within a month, she was walking again. And the day she walked was December 23rd, a couple days before Christmas. And the look on Abdullah's face when she started walking, I mean, he broke down. But it was that exact same look that Joe had when he got hugged by that Ecuadorian woman. Like, awesome. I now have a purpose. I can be of use to my people again. I can be useful, not a handout. Yes, we could have given him some money. Yes, we could have given him some food. We gave him an opportunity, and he stepped up to serve again. I'll just never forget that gentleman's face, Abdullah. And by that time, I ended up finding out that he had been tortured for 6 months. And looked, one day he was changing, saw that his back, and he had hundreds of electrical burns all over his back. Never mentioned a day in his life to me, just saw that, found out through a friend, and his friend ended up telling me how he had very severe PTSD for a couple years and almost taking his life. And so I had seen this model of people severely affected with PTSD, a person like Joe just had depression, dealt with some stuff, and then myself on the lightest side of the house of just feeling out of place and loss of purpose. But that same formula of the pararescue creed that's kind of broken down into a couple things. Those 3 things that I'm talking about. It is my duty as a pararescueman to save lives and to aid the injured. There is my purpose. It's clear. It's distinct. I'm waking up every single day. This is what I'm doing. And guess what? This isn't just working for the veterans community. This isn't just working for refugees fleeing ISIS. I took that knowledge and started connecting the dots. When I got my new job, I'm working with Ken, and I have a wonderful job. I get to speak to veterans all day. I've traveled all over northern Ohio, northeast Ohio. And I was at an event and spent about 30 minutes talking to a Vietnam veteran. done 3 tours in Vietnam, and got back in '71. Worked for 40 plus years as an iron worker, and retired in 2012. And when he retired, PTSD started flaring back up. We don't know what it was. He almost left his wife after 40 years. His wife was there at that time and said he was a changed person, started drinking a bunch, was lost. And then he ended up finding the Veteran Service Commission, and tells me the story that for the past 2 years, he ended up going all over his county and basically connecting veterans with services that they didn't know they needed or didn't know they had access to. I mean, he was putting miles upon miles upon miles on his car every single day. He wasn't getting paid for this. And just like the enthusiasm that he was having and that his wife was talking about, like, yes, he was the guy I knew that I married for 40 years. And when he got to serve again, it was that continued sense of purpose that was so strong. That question that he told me, it resonated, was those 2 years when I was struggling, I didn't know what the answer was of what the hell am I here for now. So that's when I think about that. Like, okay, I need that purpose. That purpose works for me. It works for Vietnam veterans after they retire. It works for refugees fleeing ISIS. But guess what? We also have to give them that opportunity. And you need that adversity. That's something we always lack today, with that sense of adversity. When someone that's hurting, the last thing that you want to do is put them under a little bit more strain. But we think some of the worst things, that brings people together, not only at an individual level. I was still young, but I still remember quite clearly the awful day of September 11th, 2001. But I also remember the 2 or 3 years after that, about the pride that we had in America, that sense of unity that came from that. And so we cannot forget that concept of placing these duties before personal desires and comforts. You only can build teams, you only can build unity, especially when you get people from all different backgrounds, through that adversity. And then finally and foremost, you could have a sense of purpose. That sense of purpose could be waking up, going to a business, making $1 million a day. You could do that with a group of other people that have this exact same shared purpose. You feel unified. We all get to make $1 million a day. But there's still, I've met people, Wall Street bankers, that are a lot less happy than some refugees I met in the camps. What's the difference? It's this third last point that I want to talk about. It's that others may live. It has to be to a bigger purpose. Every single person in here in the military joined the military to serve something bigger than themselves. Every parent in here knows what it's like to wake up and take care of a child day in and day out. We cannot forget that if we don't have a purpose, and that purpose isn't served to serve something bigger than ourselves, we're always going to continue to struggle. And so I'll conclude today by saying every single person in here is a veteran, every single person in here is a veteran advocate, and every single person knows somebody that is struggling with the single question of what the hell am I here for now? And so if that question pops into your head for somebody, I ask you, the 10 years it took me to learn finally, it's these 3 things here. A purpose, give them some adversity to create some shared sense of purpose, and then finally make sure that's something bigger than themselves, such as that others may live. Thank you so much for listening to me for almost 55 minutes. I would love to answer some questions. Yes, sir.
What is your opinion? Why does it seem that World War I, II, Korean veterans don't seem to have had the problems afterwards, like Vietnam and so forth, the suicide rate and so forth? Why is that, do you think?
What's your name, sir? First name?
Jeff.
Jeff, thank you so much for the question. I've struggled with this. I think it's a great question. Yes, thank you so much. Sorry for Dale. So the question he asked was World War I vets, World War II vets, Korean War vets. Why was this not the issue compared to some of our Vietnam veterans, my generation especially? Why was this not a problem? And the numbers do actually show that. Obviously the data isn't perfect for World War I, World War II, but there's a reason why we call World War II the greatest generation, was they came back, everyone served. There was a large portion of our society to serve. It was weird. If you read any history books, most of you guys were around in the 1950s to say thank you for your service. It was like, I served too, he served, he served, he served. Like, no, my job is to get back. We had an opportunity called the GI Bill to go to school, to get a trade, to buy a house, and continue working with that family. And then I would also talk about the sense of disunity, especially in the past couple decades of our country. You can look at other symptoms of disunity, of our country slowly and surely growing further and further apart. There's one metric that's not just shows with veterans with PTSD. There's also another metric that we don't talk about a lot, but it's actually pretty relevant to today. There's mass shootings. If you remember, there was actually almost the first time a mass shooting, what that's defined as is a person going in with a nihilistic intent, like, hey, I'm just going to go and shoot up a bunch of people and kill 3 or more people. The first time that ever showed up in U.S. history was 1930s, during the Great Depression. A lot of historians talk about the seams of us kind of ripping apart the disunity during the 1930s. But then guess what? World War II happened. No mass shootings. Disappeared. And then since the 1980s, it upticked. Slowly and surely increased. And then 9/11 happened. And for 2 years, there was 0 mass shootings. And it started again, and as you see, it's continuing to go up and up again. And I know that's a huge bunch of politics about, is it gun control, is it people? I know what the stats say. I know that Vietnam veterans had half the casualty rates, twice the PTSD rates of World War II veterans. I know that for my Afghan and Iraq veterans, we had a quarter of the casualty rates of our Vietnam veterans, but 3 times the PTSD level. So there's a bunch of stuff, but why is it every single time we as a country have a national disaster that we actually come together? And for a couple years, and that wasn't just for mass shootings after 9/11, for 2 years, same thing. New York, the depression rates dropped. There's people that weren't refilling their prescription rates. In the VA, they had a sharp decline of active people that are seeking new PTSD claims. So I don't have an exact answer, but I do think it is something going along the lines of, we were meant for an environment of hard work with serving along with people. And unfortunately, I think as we go to living in big cities, getting away from hard work, getting away from kind of that group mindset, I think it's a very detrimental thing on the human spirit. So that's the best answer that I've been found out. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Would you think it was the way they were treated when they came back? They were heroes from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And
what was your name, sir?
Virgil.
Virgil. So Virgil just asked, hey, was it the way they were treated? Obviously after World War II, the country rightfully honored them like they were supposed to be. In Vietnam, as all of you know a lot better than I do, it's a national disgrace on how we returned our veterans. But that still doesn't answer of why are Iraq and Afghan vets having 3 times the higher PTSD rates. And I've walked everywhere and been thanked for my service. So I'm still struggling on that aspect of, obviously, with level of care for Iraq and Afghan vets. I have some great people in the VA. I've worked with a lot of great nurses and doctors. I think that's great. But I still wonder about the Vietnam side of the house, about why that isn't the same that's happening to our Iraq and Afghan vets when their PTSD rates are way worse, even though the welcoming we get is way better. In magnitudes orders are better of what the Vietnam veterans got. So.
Would you describe your 4 years at the Air Force Academy?
It's Air Force Academy. So talking about the sense of purpose, realize back, so my mom is here, and since it's Mother's Day, I'm gonna have to point her out. And I realized that she was a single mom, she busted her butt every single day. And I was 10 years old. We were up in Alaska, actually, and I met 2 F-16 pilots wearing their little flight suit, and they had these giant rings on. And so I asked them, like, what are those? Like, what do you do? They're like, we're fighter pilots, went to Air Force Academy. It's amazing. You should go. So I'm an impressionable 10-year-old kid. I'm like, I'm doing that. And so my mom busted her butt to send me to every after-school thing. I did Civil Air Patrol. I played 15 sports. You name it, I did it. Got very, very fortunate to get my congressional appointment to the academy. I was a little bit of a hellion. My mom says I was a really good kid, but I did a lot of not bad stuff, but just you're in Tennessee mountains with a bunch of other high school kids. I got myself in a lot of country trouble and not like bad stuff. But I remember going to the Air Force Academy, and for the first year at the Air Force Academy, you have to march everywhere at attention. You have room inspections every single day, a couple times a day. You have to march to breakfast, march to lunch, march to dinner. So after basic training, after walking everywhere, military style at attention, and then the first Friday night at midnight, I was ironing my underwear, and I smuggled my phone in to call up a couple of my buddies that had gone to University of Tennessee, so civilians. And they're like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm ironing my underwear. It's midnight at the Air Force Academy because I have a big room inspection tomorrow morning. But it ended up being the best experience in my life. It allowed me to see people from all over the United States. I was 18 years old, and just to see the goodness of America day in and day out. And going through there, I actually went to the Air Force Academy. I thought I wanted to be a pilot, and got my pilot slot my junior year when they announce it, and started your senior year. You get to fly single engine planes there. And all of my other buddies, my roommate is a pilot to this day. A lot of my best friends are pilots. Just, they came back with this enthusiasm every day after flying. And I'm like, that's just not the same for me. Where it was good, but I was always like, okay, let me get down on the ground. Like, I want to go play rugby. I want to go do this other stuff. And that's when I got plugged into the special operations side of the search and rescue. And so I was very fortunate to go that path and kind of get selected. And after 2 years when I finished the Air Force Academy. So I graduated in 2007 from the Air Force Academy with 800 other people. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, the answer to the Vietnam part,
Yes, sir.
there's a lot of civil unrest in the United States at that time. Cross burnings, riots, and then we get shipped to Vietnam. It's the same doggone thing. There's a lot of cross burnings and riots over there. Then we come back, and it wasn't a war like World War I or World War II. It was a mess, to put it politely. So that's why it was like, why even go over there? And now the country, they got it. Okay, and now North Korea and South Korea is getting along. We waste a lot of bodies killing people for no reason at all. Okay, that's why we go to group therapy, because it was something that we wasn't used to. I'm from Medina. I've never seen anything. I've seen the cross burnings and stuff like that, but the stuff that I saw over there, it wasn't fit for human consumption. And it's like, why? There was no purpose in it. And some of the guys get over it. I'm trying to get over it, but you can leave Vietnam, but Vietnam never leaves you. So it was a stupid war for stupid politicians, and it takes a lot to shake that off.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm done.
No,
I could go on for an hour or two.
no, that's so
I gotta get
important.
home $50.
I hear you. No, I mean, and we didn't have the same disgraceful homecoming as you guys did. On our side of the house with the Iraq and Afghan vets, my personal story was in Afghanistan. I was just sharing this story just briefly. So there's a fighting season because the Hindu Kush, the passes between Pakistan and Afghanistan, they snow over around November timeframe. And so all the supplies get cut off for the Taliban about that time. So basically the fighting season, for the most part, ends in about November and doesn't start back up until April. So I got there towards the end, right towards the end of a fighting season, and we were just supporting these operations for a bunch of Marines that were going to retake a village, an Afghan village, for the 4th time in the 4th fighting season in a row. And our intelligence guys had the most amazing maps about, we're going to get ambushed here, you're going to pick them up in a helicopter here. I mean, just, we knew every single thing. Like, it was like, day 1, people are going to die here. Day 3, people are going to die here. Day 5, people are going to die. And you ask the military intelligence guys of like, why the hell are we going into this place for the 4th time? You know, we're doing our job here. We're retaking this. We're securing it. And you start talking to the State Department guys, you start talking to the development guys, and it ended up being the mayor of that town was a corrupt piece of crap and was basically selling weapons that he was getting from the Afghan government to the Taliban. And the citizens of that town hated the mayor because he was siphoning off the resources that were supposed to be given to him. So they're not going to support the mayor. They're going to support the Taliban every chance they get. And so that frustration of, we've now been at war for 17 years in Afghanistan, and yeah, what was that purpose? And the only thing that I can pull out of this for my generation is things like this of, A, I'm never going to let that happen again with all the power that I can do. And from hopefully some of these awful, awful, awful things that I saw, that a lot of my generation saw a lot worse than I did, that maybe we can turn this shitty situation into some good and continue to serve some other people. And I wish I could have a better answer, but yeah. What other questions do we have? Yes, please.
Hopefully this is a little lighter question. I am curious, I was on B-52s, and I remember the toughest thing leaving was missing a crew. You know, your family's tight, but your crew is, that's a big thing. And I'm curious, when you talk about, you know, between community and purpose and that sort of thing, it seems to me it took a long time to get that crew camaraderie, and it looked like your Rubicon situations, you're talking about that kind of crew mentality in a couple of weeks. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how was it different building a team in the military versus building a team in Rubicon, and if so, what were the differences?
No, so great question. So the big question that he asked was, he was served on B-52s, and the crew was like your family, if not more than your family at times. And with Team Rubicon, obviously all that time, that takes years sometimes to develop. In Team Rubicon, you might be on a deployment, an operation for 2 weeks. And so is that possible to create that same level of community? For me, I mean, I came from special operations, and for all the good or bad, for all the good that comes with, that also comes with the elitist side of the house. I always tried to fight that as best I could, and I go, well, how can I do this Team Rubicon thing? But then you get just mesmerized by people that didn't go through 2 years of jump school, didn't go through 2 years of the world's, best training, and yet we're stepping up. We had a mom that saved up vacation for all year so her husband could do Christmas, so she could go serve as an example for her 5-year-old daughter to go serve in Team Rubicon, because she was a pediatric nurse, and we needed that skill set and that refugee camp. And so you learn of this person's story, and you just get humbled of like, wow, like you're doing something like that, and I don't understand everything about your background, but just hearing that and then seeing they're earnest, they're not there for the picture, they're not there for the Facebook posts, they're there because they're just so excited to serve, then you go, wow. Like, we have a lot of differences and a lot of different backgrounds, but I think every person knows within 2 weeks of basic training, some of those people, are going to be your best friend for the rest of your life. And it was because of the adversity. And I would argue that the higher the adversity, the quicker the opportunity to bond with those individuals is.
Team Rubicon, typical, I know they're all different, but
Yep.
A typical deployment where you were with the same people, was that?
Overseas is 2 months. Here locally, we just did an operation in October to Andover, far eastern part of Ohio, when the tornado hit down. We just went to a neighborhood. We have sawyer skills, so we cleared a bunch of roads, helped clean up a bunch of houses. That was just 2 days. But every month they have a get-together, they have training side of the house. And so it's obviously, sometimes that's difficult, those scenarios, but just sitting down and having that quick conversation. I think anybody here knows, like, you just say, you meet somebody with a Marine Corps hat on or a Vietnam hat, there's that bond. And so with people that have that mindset of, I'm here to serve, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a combat medic, there's that bond there. It just, you got to look for it, is my experience. All right, well, thank you so much. I do have one last ask. So part of this disunity that we've talked about, I try not to be always the cynic and try to be constructive. So the downside is, well, who is not in this room? Everyone in here is probably very closely tied to a veteran. There's no one under 30 here, which breaks my heart in some aspects, because not only did they hear my story, they need to hear your stories about how great this country is, what the sacrifices we had to do. So something that the one small step that we've been trying to do was since 3 years ago, there's something called a Veterans Town Hall. And we say, instead of saying thank you to a veteran on November 11th, will you come out and listen to a couple veterans from World War II vets all the way to Afghan and Iraq veterans, share what they learned about going to war, what it was like going to war. So it started 3 years ago, this movement called Veterans Town Hall, that they're trying to say every Veterans Day, November 11th, let's have this in a town hall or a public space, and let's invite high school students, let's invite college students. That's what it means to be on Veterans Day, is to come out and listen to them. So we had our first one. We were actually down in Canton, and we had the last Pearl Harbor survivor speak, Cal Calderon, down in Stark County, as well as basically every veteran all the way up to Iraq for an hour and a half. And we had high school kids there, and they come up afterwards of like, wow, that makes sense now. And so you just had that recognition. So November 11th, we already reserved it. Library is awesome. We're having it here at the Medina Library. It'll be posted up. We're not sure the exact time. It'll be in the afternoon. So if you'd like or interested into that, I have my business card. I can keep you updated. But we're trying to do that, bringing people together. If they actually can hear these stories, especially some young school students, they can make that connection and be a little bit less disunited. That's all I got. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Say again?